Don't wait till the battle's over. Don't wait till the struggle ends. Shout now, shout now, right now. Shout now, shout now. Don't wait till you make it.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the Phillip Show. Today we're talking about art. How does art impact our life? How do we decide that art is the journey that we're going to take? And what impact does that have on other people? You know, we all know artists. We all know people that are very artistic and they have their own gifts and their own talents. But what happens when your art impacts people in such a way that they're moved to action, that they're moved to want to purchase your art, that they're moved to be inspired to do more things? So today we're talking to Jill Beckner. Jill, how are you?
Good, thank you.
Great to see you. How are you doing today?
I'm great, thank you.
Oh, wonderful. So today we're talking about art. What in the world of art, where are you positioned? How is art impacting you?
Well, I'm a lifelong modern dancer and choreographer and had a dance company in New York. So my life has really been centered on art and movement, and especially abstract movement, where the message is really determined by the viewer and the life of the viewer. So they bring as much creativity to it as the artist does.
Do you think people miss that piece? Do you think people kind of get it when it's just like sometimes you're expressing yourself and you think it's kind of all about your performance, but do people always know how much it impacts people?
How do you mean it? Like for people in the audience, do they know?
Yeah.
Well, I think it's so personal how people are impacted. So I think a lot of times people will say things like after a performance, in my case, and they'll say things and I go like, oh my gosh, that's what you saw? You know, it's very fluid and very open to interpretation. And for me as a choreographer, it was very open to interpretation, even from one performance to the next. Like a dance would be talking to me and I'd get a whole other series of images.
As a performer, did you ever hear the feedback and then alter how you actually did the next performance based on that feedback?
No, I didn't do that. But once with Ira, who we're going to talk later about, I tried to talk him through all my mental processes while I was performing, like replay what I was thinking about during a particular piece. And once I had told him all these little images and metaphors that came to mind, the next time I did it in performance, it was completely flat. Like
Wow.
it took all the magic out of it.
Oh, no.
And I thought, no, that's just my process. That I have to keep that. It's sort of like if you tell a creative idea too soon before it's unfolded in your own mind, it can kind of lose its charge for you personally. But,
yeah. That's super interesting because I'm a creative myself and I know exactly what you mean. Once it's out there, it's kind of like, ah. So you mentioned Ira. Tell us a little bit about Ira. Tell us about him.
I met Ira in 1972 in San Francisco, and we were both quite young. And after hanging out for about 3 days, he leaned over and told me a poem. And I thought, oh my God, you're a poet. I had no idea he was a poet. We hadn't even talked about what we did. You know, wow. We were just like in a state of flow. And then I would hear him read. We lived in the Mission District in San Francisco, and he was very gravitated toward jazz musicians. And later in life, he often performed with them. Like they would almost like trading eights when musicians do that. He'd talk a little, they'd play a little, or they'd overlap and just kind of swim around together.
Oh, wow. And he was also a painter.
When he was about 48, he felt like his poetry dried up. Like he said, I just wasn't hearing it anymore. And the story I heard was that he just picked up a piece of pastel and was talking to somebody, a cerulean blue piece of chalk, and started drawing on a brown paper bag. And he said, I can do this. And he was just like, all of a sudden, even though the poetry felt at that point like it had dried up, all of a sudden this other world opened. And I think it really was life-saving for him to find that. And then he just was like gushing out paintings for the next 15 or 20 years.
So how did your journey and his journey, how did you stay connected and follow along with what he was doing and how he began to just create for so many years?
Well, we were very close, and then the relationship kind of disintegrated, but in the meantime, we had a child. And so when I moved out here to Ohio, he moved out here too. Our son was 10 years old, and he was really, very strongly connected to our son. So he moved out here, and he had already started painting a little bit. We came from Ithaca, New York.
Okay.
And he kept painting here. Louise Smith over at the theater, Foundry Theater at Antioch, gave him studio space. So he was just like really, really involved in painting and got a lot of joy out of it. And then later he got a studio. He was actually given space to work at the Collaboratory in Dayton and painted there for the next several years.
When you say, for the people that are watching, when you say he was given space at the Collaboratory, can you kind of describe what that means?
Peter Benkendorf ran the Collaboratory, and he had a gigantic space in downtown Dayton, and it gave sort of corners of the space, which were large, not just a little corner, but a big area that people could do acrylics, oil painting. And Ira lived in Yellow Springs, but he commuted in and worked in Dayton. Yeah.
That space, I know you said you from New York, right? Ithaca, near New York. I know the space in New York is very expensive. Very expensive to have a space like that. Was it something that was unique, coming here and working here and having that collaborative space? Was that something that was unique that may have only been able to be even thought about in this particular area?
Well, I think the fact that there is this person, Peter Benkendorf, who opened the space, I think that's very particular to him. He's kind of like a one-man think tank. Like he's always got stuff going on. He's into different projects now, very involved, and he's helped me a lot with finding storage space for these paintings. Ira and I actually lived in New York City, where space was really expensive.
Yeah.
But he had a Olivetti typewriter, so he was just in the corner of the apartment typing away. And we lived in New York City for about 11 years. And in that time, we lived for a few years in the Netherlands.
Okay.
And
wow.
So he got, his poetry was heard. He kind of entered the poetry scene in Amsterdam for a couple of years, and had a book published there. Oh,
wow.
Yeah.
He's just an all-around artist.
Yeah. But very much a poet, and like from 70 to, from his 20s to his late 40s, and then back into painting. And then in the last years, like when he passed away in 2015, he had a manuscript sitting on his old typewriter, and he was typing away and making new poems. So he must have come back to it.
I'm so interested to know, since you've journeyed with him so much, and he's such a painter, but also such a poet, did you see any similarities between what he wrote and what he painted?
Yes, I would say so, because in both cases, there's a sense of free flow. So his paintings are very abstract. I mean, people are always saying, oh, I see this and I see that. But in fact, they're very abstract, very open to interpretation. And his poems were like that. Like he'd be kind of in a realm to talk about a poem. Like one of the poems I think I would like to share with you, we were mountain climbing, or not mountain climbing, but hiking in the Muir Woods outside of San Francisco. And he wrote this poem about what he saw in the woods. Would you like to hear it?
I would love to hear it.
Okay. This was one of my favorites. It's entitled Up to the Rolling Knee-High Grass. Up to the rolling knee-high grass through a rainy forest redwood, dipping throwback fishbone leaf in liquid air, sun steaming ground, shrub fern and oilback earth, Fog steep stepping flat rock slide. Higher and higher, cloud branch light, hinting spotted shy quick deer, footloose legs and running joy, hugging trees for deeper breath. Scooping cold in clear stream, downpour flow, sudden sweat, opening yellow, the hilly stretch of soft-shouldered gravel sand, crouching for pebbles to skim or suck, the ripe and prickly berry black that leads to stone and slanted wood, reaching for sky, a patch of weed then grass, rolling knee-high, rolling light, all the way down to the sea.
Wow, that's beautiful. What imagery.
Yeah. And do you see what I mean about a kind of free flow? We're taking this ride. Where shall we go?
Yeah, it seems very experiential.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like very experiential. He's just experiencing and sharing while he experiences. And I love the way that it captures you and kind of pulls you into the scene. And it's like you can see all of it.
Yeah.
You can see all of it. What type of, as a painter, what, I guess, genre? Because a lot of painters have a particular genre. Some do landscape. You mentioned he was abstract. When does he have a particular genre or type?
I would say abstract expressionist.
Okay, and why would you say that?
Yeah, it's a lot of color. It's a lot of motion. You don't see any forms, and he was an untrained artist.
Oh wow!
Completely untrained. I mean, when he picked up that piece of chalk, that was day one. He
Wow.
never drew or any of that. But we always, everywhere we lived, we always went and saw a lot of art. So he'd taken in beautiful things for years and years. But yeah, you don't see any figures in it. And that's actually unusual. Someone told me, an art curator told me that typically people who are untrained, what they call outsider or art, though I think that's a little bit of a strange word, that they usually do figures. There's some form you can see in the painting, but that's not the case with him. His work is totally abstract. There'll be like a color scheme, like lots of blues or like in an orange range, but the shapes are just like going all over the place. And they're very energizing. Most of them are very energizing. I don't know which ones were finished and unfinished when he passed because I didn't know. But the ones that seem complete, they have a lot of motion in them and this real electric, vital kind of light and color.
Wow. Wow. It's like I would love to see one like right now. So
Well,
you
can
now
see one behind me. There's one up above the piano.
Oh, that's wonderful.
I don't know
Wow.
if you can see it very well, but it's pastel. It's in the pastel realm.
That's beautiful. It almost takes on the shape of however you feel.
Yeah.
You know, when you look at it, it's just like I see one of those pictures, like what do you see? How does this make you feel? It's not it doesn't lead you in one direction. It just leaves it open to your interpretation. That's beautiful.
Exactly. That's
So you
right.
have a collection of his work now that you're actually presenting. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So that is, it's going to be the first Friday in Dayton, July 1st.
Mm-hmm.
Opening at around 4:00. It's part of the Art Hop, the first Friday Art Hop in Dayton. And it's over near Front Street. So Front Street is on one corner, and this is kitty corner from that, the Orphanage Gallery. And then right across from Front Street, it's actually in two different galleries, the Orphanage and Momentum Gallery. And the address of the Orphanage Gallery is 73 North Dutoit Street.
Okay.
So, and I think it's going to be a lot of people bopping around and there'll be signs directing you to different places. But so his work, many of them are very large, but there are some smaller ones and some medium-sized ones.
How did you get the showing at this particular gallery?
Well, Ira had a friend, Dave Crowell, who stretched canvases for him, and he has a picture framing shop. Mm-hmm. And he has helped me to connect with these galleries he kind of made it happen, honestly. And just yesterday, he drove a U-Haul truck and moved all the paintings. There are about 65 of them, so a lot. And some are very, very large. He drove them for me. So he made the connection and found these 2 galleries so people can go back and forth between. And Bill Montana runs the Orphanage, and he's been very helpful. Like, I'm not from the visual art world, so I don't know how much to charge for a painting, but his philosophy is that art should be affordable. People should have real art on their walls, not just reproductions. So yeah, so it's going to be, they're going to be very affordable for their size, especially.
And it runs from the 1st all the way through the 17th. Is that right?
That's right. So the 1st, it's open from 4 till 11 at night, or 4 till 10. And then on the Sunday, which is the 3rd Sunday in Dayton, it'll run from 11 in the morning till 4 in the afternoon.
What do you want people to know about the art?
I think that once you have it, or even once you see it, it's completely yours to interpret. That you don't need to try to figure it out. It's like modern dance in this way. Like, you just take the ride and see what you get from it, because it's like free associating. You see it. I mean, I always wanted with my work, and I think Ira would be the same, to stimulate people, for people to feel enlivened by what they've experienced.
So you're producing, well, not producing, you're what's the artistic word? Are you curating? Are you hanging? Are you
I guess I'm producing it, because I've had a lot of help with hanging it up, because I don't do that, but these guys and women hung it up for me yesterday. But I would say I'm producing it, and I'm kind of doing it because it had to be done. You know, I had that strong connection for so many years with Ira, and we have a child, a grown up now. But when he passed away, he didn't have a partner. There was nobody else to do it. And at the time, there were more than 100 paintings in his apartment. Wow. They were just all in the apartment, and some downtown in Dayton, still in the collaboratory. So it just felt like, you know how some things, like, somebody's got to do this. I'm doing it. It's not really rational, but I feel like, in a way, from doing it, it's rekindled my affection for him as a younger person, and as a creative person, and as a soulful person. You know, he was deep. His writing was very deep, and his painting was deep. And I'm really glad he found painting. You know, that was a ground wire for him, as well as a launching pad.
Yeah, when you said you're glad that he found painting, why were you glad?
Well, he did suffer from depression.
Okay.
And I think, you know, there's art therapy, but I think for all artists, it's therapy. Making work is very heartening and enlivening, and just makes you feel good. You know, you're caught up in it. So, and he actually felt like these paintings were coming through him. And he talked about that in some interviews, that he just felt like, you know, possessed is a little too magical sounding, but it kind of like possessed. Like, this is what I've got to do. This is coming out of me. He was ecstatic. He was an ecstatic painter.
He's an ecstatic painter. How is his, you said he had his poetry was published.
Yes.
Does he just have one book of poetry?
No, he has, I think his first one was this one called Hubba Hubba.
Hubba Hubba.
And that's the poem that I read from. He had maybe 4 or 5 books. This one was called Ubangi the Piano.
Oh, wow.
Kind of a funny one. And at one point, he became kind of obsessed with writing questions. And he wrote a poem. He wrote it on a scroll. So when he performed it, the scroll would roll out into the audience, because it consisted of 1,000 questions.
Wow.
Would you like me to read a few of those?
Absolutely.
Yeah? Okay.
Absolutely.
And he edited it. He spent a few years on this poem, but I'll just read section 1, which is, I don't know, maybe 15 questions.
Okay.
Are you happy? Do you talk to yourself out loud in public? Do you like what you are doing? Have you wanted to cry for a long time? Are there good bosses, and just wars? Do pep talks depress you and vice versa? Are you floating on a wine dark sea? Are you guilty? How would you like to die? Who would you like to kill? Are you racist or sexist? Is there plutonium in your lung? What is wrong with the way you look? Is harmony compromise? Are table manners important? Do you believe in real estate? Can your next door neighbor read and write and prove it? Have you ever been introduced as a funny person? Do most men remind you of little boys? Do you dress for success or breakfast? Is irony adult? And what about orgasm? Have you kissed a corpse? What is it like behind enemy lines? Do you miss trains that run on time? Are elevators responsible for mental illness? Have you murdered a mouse with imported cheese? Who fixes the price of currency? What is the benefit of clergy or state? Do you banish bitterness and waste? Are you a leader or a follower or neither? Are you in jail this very minute? Do you fast for solitude and health? Are you passing the world by on principle? Do your brainwaves spiral like a nautilus? Would you like to lose a lump sum of vanity? Can you warp and woof? Are you breeding in the shadow of a cyclotron? Are you graceful like an elm? Are the rouge dabs in the sky? Are you happy?
Wow.
So that's section 1 of the questions.
I'm over here pondering my life. Now, do you sit and kind of read that and just kind of contemplate and try to answer the questions for yourself?
I don't. I mean, actually, as I read it, when he would read, he was extremely dynamic, like jumping all over the place. And, well, not jumping all over the place, but he was physically moving, and his voice had a lot of melody and change in it and quality change. So it feels a little funny to sit still and read it, to tell you the truth.
Because of his personality.
Right. It would be much more explosive.
Wow. What does this this paintings by Ira, what does this mean to you?
Well, that's a good question. I feel kind of almost protective, like paintings actually disintegrate when they're stored and when they're moved around. They lose a lot of, like 3 of the very large ones started to disintegrate. So I feel kind of like a caretaker in a way, like I want these to go out in the world and be seen. One that I really love, it's actually one of my favorite, I'm trying to donate to the Dayton Public Library because they've got big walls and beautiful light. So I feel like, it just wouldn't be right for them to just disappear. And some of them did get ruined where they were stored. There was some water damage. So some of them are gone. But I feel like they shouldn't be sitting in a storage space. They should be, appreciated and enjoyed. And so I think, in a way, it's a kind of loyalty to him that I want them to be out in the world. So I think that's probably part of it that I hardly even admit to myself. But, that I was partners with him for 25 years. And we both loved art like crazy, and we loved each other's art. So, and he was totally supportive of my career as a choreographer. So I think it's kind of a loyalty in a way.
Well, that's beautiful. I'm so glad that you shared your heart and you're sharing him with the rest of the world when, his voice lives on, because you are passionate about keeping it and maintaining it and sharing it. And that's such an inspiration. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you.
Absolutely. And we know that paintings by Ira Beryl Brukner will be available the first Friday, right?
That's right.
The first
Down by Front
Friday.
Street.
Well, thank you so much, Jill, for being here and giving us a glimpse of such an artistic and loving world.
Thank you, Philip. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, art takes on so many shapes. It takes on so many emotions. It takes on such a life of itself. And a lot of times when we see it, when we hear it, we remember, if we were fortunate enough to know them, we remember the artist, we remember the sounds, we remember the characters. So we thank Jill for being here today. And remember, paintings by Ira Beryl Brukner will be available first Friday in Dayton, July 1st through the 17th. The Orphanage Gallery and Momentum Gallery. You'll have all the information that you need. Remember that you are the best you in the world, and we will see you next time here on The Phillip Show.
Don't